would drive a PhD student to launch a startup in the middle of the research? And what does it take to scale that company to a point where a global photonics giant comes knocking? In this episode, we sit down with Paul Webster, Chief Technology Officer and General Manager of IPG Photonics Canada, to unpack his journey from academic curiosity to successful hard tech exit. Paul founded LaserDep Dynamics in 2012, Jericho startup Chaos while finishing his PhD, and ultimately sold the company to IPG Photonics in 2017. We'll explore the moment that shaped his path, what he would do differently, how he handled technical failure, if any, and the lesson that he wants every hard tech founder to take to heart. Hello, and welcome back. My name is Pang Sang Kaw from Siemens Industry Software. I'm excited to be your new host of Pioneers, Startups from Dream to Reality, the Siemens podcast where we explore the real stories behind bold startups that are transforming industries with cutting-edge innovation and the ecosystem helping them make it happen. Paul, it is such a pleasure to have you with us today. Your journey from research lab to real-world impact is exactly the kind of story we love to explore on this podcast. From co-founding a startup while finishing your PhD to navigating the realities of commercialization, team building, and acquisition, you lived the full hard tech founder arc. I'm excited to dive into the lessons, turning points, and maybe a few of the battle scars along the way. Let's get into it. All right, Paul, can you take us back to your PhD research at Queen's? What problems were you trying to solve?
So when I came to Queen's, I was starting on a project to try and improve a medical imaging modality called optical coherence tomography. It had been widely used in the medical industry to look into the layers of people's retina. And I was looking to try and find ways to use particular laser techniques to improve OCT. While I was working on that, we were joined with another problem that was brought to our lab related to laser machining, with the bend of trying to make cardiovascular stents in a better way using a particular kind of laser. Really, it was bringing these two technologies together that we saw there was a potential to do that and get information with OCT out of the laser machining process, maybe in ways that were never possible any other way, that we found that, in particular, we could measure laser welding and the quality of laser welding very accurately and in a very, again, unique way. So that's how the technology originally came together.
So, Paul, you and I have known each other for a while as one of the startups in Kingston and myself as one of the company that also started in Kingston. So it's really interesting how you went into thinking you're doing research in the medical field. And I know that LaserDep did not end up in the medical field. Do you want to kind of touch on that journey a little bit for us?
Today, we do actually support the medical field in a way that kind of come full circle again in some ways. But we started our journey as a research operation. I didn't have any entrepreneurial aspirations back then. We thought that the technology we'd come up with seemed interesting enough to the industry, and we were even thinking of applying it to surgical guidance and things of that sort at the very beginning. We thought it was interesting enough that we should at least try and file a patent on it. And that brought us to the University Tech Transfer Office, which at those times was called Partech. These days, I think it's the Office of Partnerships and Innovation or something. It was the fact that we got brought together with them, and they saw quite a lot of value in the technology as well. And a particular individual in the office saw enough potential that he was even considering leaving his position there to start a company with him. It was really his idea that, this is a good enough idea that we should try and make a business out of it. And he figured he knew how. And then he was the guy who put the idea in my head, really, that this is a possibility, showed me the way that we could even begin to contemplate doing such a thing. But before then, I was a purely technical person, wanted to solve difficult problems and be really smart. And it was having enough of those conversations and having the path shown to me that opened my mind to that possibility. And I'm very glad that it did go that way.
Well, that's really interesting, Paul. So I was going to ask you, what was your pivot moment where you're like, hey, we got something here? But it sounds like, from your perspective, at least, that someone like yourself that's doing research in the university lab, that you really need to work with the ecosystem that are supporting the startup because they will see things that you may not have. So if someone within Partech that saw that vision, that what the technology you're developing has a commercial value that potentially could turn into a company, is that a fair statement?
I think that, having that person there that could see that potential, or at least had been through the process of starting a technology business before. This individual had made a previous hard tech startup, and he knew what that pathway would look like. I think at that point, he didn't know what the market was going to be or even what the product was going to be necessarily. We hadn't decided between surgical guidance and support for manufacturing yet at that point.
Complete opposite industry.
They were very different industries. And honestly, my heart was initially in the medical therapeutic side of things.
Right.
But as we started to think more and more about starting a business on this, the regulatory runway to go into a medical therapeutic product and the density of imaging technologies in that space already led us to decide that manufacturing was a better place to go. The time to market was going to be a lot shorter, the regulatory hurdles a lot smaller. And so for a business where we didn't plan to do a huge raise and then burn for 3 years while we sold nothing, it was much better to go into manufacturing. And so if you want to look for like pivotal moments, I think, first of all, the decision to turn down my job offers and start a company. And secondly, to go in and do manufacturing, I think we're pretty big ones at the beginning.
So it sounds like very early on, you had a prototype or an MVP that was ready for the market. Did you go to the market right away with an MVP, or how many rounds or how many series of financing did you get to before you were ready to launch your first product?
Well, I'll take the product question and then we'll go to the financing question afterwards. The company had a name, although it didn't have a legal embodiment, as early as 2011. Because we had also received some commercialization grants from I think it was the federal government, not the province, at that early stage, there was a way to legitimately do research while also sharpening the axe for the initial commercial venture. There were some technical questions, some refinement that we needed to do. So I spent the last year of my PhD from 2011 to 2012. I could have defended in 2011 if I wanted, but I stayed inside the university for another year. I was kind of under their wing, financially and otherwise. And I was laying the groundwork for starting the company. And one of those things was to build kind of initial demonstration prototype, take the technology off the laboratory bench and put it in a box that I could carry to places if I needed to demonstrate that technology, either to specific people or alongside other specific equipment that we didn't have in our facility.
And did you feel that being part of that university environment, because you and I both know hard tech is really difficult to start because of the amount of investment in capital assets just to be able to build your prototype. But it sounds like because you were part of that university environment, you had access to a machine shop or a lab or whatever that you were able to build your prototype and be able to go to the customer with your prototype.
Yeah, it was really an ideal situation because we had a place where we could do things. We didn't need to be a legally incorporated company as of yet. The grants we had received were for commercialization research, so that legitimized the work in the eyes of the university. So they were totally on board with us doing that work inside. And also, our equipment has to be used alongside other very expensive equipment. And so having access to that in the university was also instrumental. So we could build our prototype, but then test it against the equipment that the university had already purchased and use that to develop further support of the technology and its value proposition and things of that sort. Create demonstrations, create data sheets, marketing things and that sort. That was all possible to happen inside the university. And it was a win-win because we were able to build the technology and the collateral around it, but the university was also getting novel research done at the same time. And in the end, when the company was a financial success, the university had a stake in it. So they won with that as well.
They were happy.
Yeah, so everybody wins.
What I found really interesting with your story is it's so unusual that a hard tech within a 5-year you sold. So I'm really curious because most hard tech go through many iterations of their prototype, their MVP and the alpha and their beta. You must be either extremely brilliant or there was just the right time at the right place that you were able to develop your first product, went to the market, create all these marketing assets, and be able to be successful and commercialize, which is quite unusual.
I would be the first person to say I was exceptionally fortunate to go through the path that I did and not hit some of the very common pitfalls that a lot of entrepreneurs see throughout their story. But one of the reasons that we were that fortunate is that I haven't introduced this yet, but very early on in the process, we were introduced to the company IPG Photonics. One of the very first lasers that we used to do our experiments came from them. That started a communication, a connection with this growing company in the industry. So IPG was a darling in the industry. They were rocketing into the stratosphere with their very disruptive laser technology. And as that laser source technology started to rise and grow the market substantially, all the associated technologies around it got to kind of ride on its wake. And we were one of those. So we were able to get a certain amount of support from them. I met IPG's founder, Valentin Gapontsev, who's sadly no longer alive, back in 2011 when I first pitched him our idea. At the time, the company, the IPG, the company was focused primarily on laser sources. They hadn't really got into the accessories around that. And so we were completely non-threatening to them. And in fact, anybody who made something that made lasers better or easy to use was a friend of IPG because they were dominating the laser game. So anytime more lasers got sold, they were almost certainly going to get that sale. So we were synergistic with them. Even though we didn't have a formal relationship, they saw the benefits that our technology was going to bring into the industry and continue to help to stoke the flames of that huge growth. So they were able to give us a low price on a laser source for us to develop the technology more. And they were instrumental to us getting our first sale. One of their salespeople in the UK connected to us to a technology group, I would say a consortium in the UK, ended up being our first customer in 2013. So we went from founding the company legally in, I think it was November of 2012, to first sale in the first half of 2013. So just because we had all the marketing collateral ready to go and we had the voice of someone trusted, IPG, telling this company, hey, check out these people, that's how we got off the ground. That first commercial sale is just so crucial. And so we were very fortunate that we were able to leverage our relationship that we had been cultivating with IPG for many years to get us to that point. We've been very, very lucky.
Well, lucky maybe, but also I think there's some strategic behind what you did, right? What I hear from you is that your research, you went down one path, but realized like you were open to other people's suggestion. You did your research, but when you start working for Partech, the technology transfer arm of Queen's University, you met someone that basically instigate a new ideas in you. Say, hey, Paul, what if we would take your research and pivot to manufacturing? Because to get the product to the market, we don't have to worry about regulation, so you can generate revenue instead of fundraising. And you were open-minded enough to listen to them and follow that. Then you open your mind to say, all right, I'm going to find strategic partners like IPG and work with them. So I don't know, I guess it's that a whole thing, right? The harder you work, the luckier you get. Maybe that's what you did. The more you are more willing to listen to people who have done it and been there, like the individual at Partech and IPG, the luckier Paul Webster became. You did not follow the typical path of hard tech. You really just found a way to be successful, which is get your prototype, create some marketing asset. And I'm going to come back to that because not every engineer understands the value of marketing. Create marketing asset, find a strategic partner, went to market with your first prototype and succeed. So let's touch on the marketing bit. I can honestly say that marketing is probably one of those things where it's brushed off by a lot of engineers as, it's not important, it's not necessary, but it's very necessary. So at what point in your journey that you realize I need to create all these marketing assets?
I think if you are reasonably confident that you have a great idea or something that's going to be really useful, then marketing becomes not convincing people so much as it is explaining. And so that's what we endeavored to do. Like I could see, because of my familiarity with the material, with the technology, the potential it had to drive improvement in these people's businesses, these customers' businesses. So my job was to help them see the world that I saw the world. I had the privilege of going to school with a lot of really smart people that could think in very high-minded, abstract ways about theoretical physics problems, mathematics, in ways that I always struggled to do. I always had to find a simple way to explain it to myself, like boiling down this complex topic into something that I could say to myself just in my own mind in 2 or 3 sentences is the way I got through this very difficult technical world. And I've just continued to do that, but for the customers now. Having thought through these things and struggled with them myself, I know the way through the forest because I've been through it. Just come this way, right this way. This is the path. This is how you look at things. And you end up having a very earnest, beneficial conversation with somebody that leads them to where you are in that clearing. And from there, you can work together. And if you're really lucky, that customer said, okay, this is a really nice clearing in the forest here.
Yeah.
But did you know there's another path over there that no one's really figured out a way to get through it yet? And you can then take that and then take the next step. And as soon as you can start that ball rolling with lots of outside contact, either with companies like IPG, we pitched our technology to so many different laser companies. Our bend was always, oh, we're really poor and we don't have any lasers. I really want to try my technology with new lasers.
Right.
Could you please just lend us a laser?
Right.
And
Please.
then when we come up with this great new technical article, your laser is going to be featured in it. Isn't that going to be great?
Yeah.
So I was constantly pitching the technology to different people and hearing about their reactions to oh, well, this would resonate with them. Or I was fortunate enough, at least in our industry, the laser industry, that at least back then, maybe still now, people are pretty open about their problems. And knowing what are the right problems to go solve is sometimes more valuable than the solutions in some ways.
It's really interesting that you said you have the ability, and I think it's such a incredible ability to have for a technical person, right? It's the ability to simplify things for the market and for your consumer. My former business partner, Ken Nicholson, brilliant engineer. Honestly, he's probably one of the most brilliant engineers I've ever worked with. But what was really unique about him is he could take very complex technology and dumb it down to say, here's the problem, Peng, and this is how we're solving it, so that I could then convey to my customers, I understand your pain point. This is what we're going to do to solve your pain points. Because at the end of the day, most people don't really care the secret sauce behind it. And one of the things that Ken taught me very early on is when you look at a product, the more refined, the simpler it is to use, the more engineer went into it. So I think your ability to do that and be able to create those marketing assets, again, to address the market pain point, it's not about pulse research. It's about the problems you're trying to solve. And that's really, from my perspective, and tell me if I'm wrong.
I think what you're talking about is empathy. To be able to transport your mind into the mind of the person across the table from you and try and understand where their thoughts are coming from, what they struggle with on a daily basis, where their fears are, and to craft a message that is going to work together with those things to get you to where you want to go. And that I think that ability is not necessarily cultivated in technical fields. Trying to do that is important, of course, in the vendor-client relationship, but even internal in the company. Yeah. That empathy skill is very important for success on all of these levels. And I don't mean this in some kind of like underhanded manipulative way. Like, it's just understanding what a person wants and trying to give that to them.
That's exactly what commercialization, sales, marketing, go-to-market, whatever you want to call it, that's exactly what it is. I used to say to my sales team, right, is that if you don't understand the customer's pain point, how can you prescribe the right drugs as an analogy to solve that pain point? I think the other point I want to touch on, when you were talking about earlier, how when people think about strategic partners, sometimes I think they forget the supplier side, right? And you understood that you need to find suppliers that could give you laser. And in many ways, you were trying to convince to partner with you. And it took a long time and not everybody saw your vision. So the point I want to touch there, I think, is that, A, you got to look beyond just the customers or the other companies or competitor out there. You got to look at a much broader scope. I went to key suppliers to try to convince them to, quote unquote, invest in us by giving a tremendous discount or whatever the case it is, so that if we succeed, we take them along the ride. And we were able to successfully do that. And you did that with IPG. I think that is so critical for founders to not always think, I got to raise money. It's like, there are other paths. From the listener perspective, if they're listening to this podcast, at what point should they start thinking about market fit for their technology?
Yeah, so I don't know if I would put market fit with a technology as much as I would with a product. I think before you start the company, you need to have an idea of if there's going to be a market for the technology. That's really just the idea, the ideation stage at that point in time. Like, I could do this to solve that. But you look at how much a company is going to pay for a royalty on a technology, is a few percent, right? Because that's only a small percentage of the amount of work. Because after you've done that, then comes building a product that is going to fit the market. Because you could come up with a $10,000 toothbrush. People need their teeth brushed, but it's not going to fit the market. It's not going to fit the market. So So yeah, the idea of brushing teeth is a good one, and a machine for brushing teeth is that's a good idea for a technology. But now we need to make a product that fits that market. Well, it's got to cost $1. Dentists have to be able to give it away for free.
Right.
Those kinds of things.
You have to worry about the pricing and all the other stuff that makes somebody want to buy.
That is an essential part of product market fit that
Right.
That needs to be thought of. And I think back when we got started, we were somewhat blissfully ignorant of exactly how much the thing was going to cost or how much we could charge for it. We had some idea what other pieces of capital equipment in the industry cost, maybe some other quality monitors and things like that. We knew we would be able to make something and sell it on the same order of magnitude, but the amount it cost us to build a system at the beginning versus how much it costs the company to build one today is vastly different. And so you don't want to get too caught up with exactly how much margin you can make, as long as there's like some degree of like a comfort level there that you're going to have some space. Exactly how much, you don't know. Because I think one of the early things that happened in the company's history, the first versions of the product we sold didn't have an automatic way of steering the measurement beam to point it exactly where you wanted it. You had to do that adjustment manually. Later on, I added some technology to allow that automatic beam steering, and it opened up a huge number of other capabilities. That really kind of turned some individuals' minds around on the technology back when we did that. My original reluctance to putting that in was that I thought that stuff was complicated and it was going to be expensive. It was going to add too much cost. Well, in the end, we added this augmentation to the product in. The incremental revenue or pricing that we added was at a higher margin than like the base product. And I never talked to a customer. They was like, oh, I don't know if it's kind of expensive. Like we just jumped the price by $10,000, $20,000. And they're like, oh yeah, that sounds good.
Because you were providing a value for them.
That price discovery thing is very interesting. So like I said, that because that process has to work out, you shouldn't get too caught up at the beginning on pricing. You've got to do a sniff test. You've got to be realistic. But if you're within a factor of 2, then go build it.
Well, I think you hit on a really important part, right? And I see this all the time as an angel investors and as a mentor, a coach in a number of incubators, is that there's so many founders, particularly when it's technical, they get excited by their technologies and they keep making, they focus on the fundraising and, I got to get this approval and got this certification and and they just hesitate to go to the market. And you wouldn't know what the market's willing to pay for unless you go out and try it. And I love the fact that you just went out and tried and you make sales and you have the cash flow to not have to go to the next round of financing. And I'm sure you're, as an investor, you say that to your founder all the time, is like, you don't have a customer, you don't have a company.
That's a fair point. You shouldn't get too caught up in that. It's ultimately be a different strategy depending on if you're doing a B2B or B2C, because the volume of units and the economies of scale you need for a B2C play is going to be so much higher. It's much more important to get the hardware, quote unquote, exactly right the first time around on a B2C play. Whereas B2B, when the volumes are low and the margins are high, like we could sell 1 or 2 units and pay for my salary for the whole year. In terms of perpetuating, keeping the company running, that allows you to take a little bit more risk, like get something out there, because the information, the feedback you're going to get is very helpful. And another thing we did that maybe was helpful along these lines is we built a product that from a hardware level was probably a little overbuilt. And we used a lot of off-the-shelf componentry where in the initial design of the product, at least, we were not using it to its full capacity. Over time, this general purpose nature of the components we had put in there allowed us to add a lot more through software as time went on. So you'd have a customer where you'd make a sale to them. You would offer one set of features to them, but then through the back and forth of that customer, you realize, well, it'd be much better if I could also add X, Y, and Z. And maybe 2 of those 3 things you can do just through software. Quickly, half of the value we started to provide to the customer was via the software. We never actually charged for a software update. Maybe we could have.
Oh, yeah, you probably could have.
We probably could have, but that was also our goal, was to develop some kind of following. Because although you don't necessarily charge for a software update, usually a customer in the manufacturing industry might buy one first for their development lab or to try on one part of their line. But if you can then make that successful, that could become 8 units for the rest of the lines in the plant. Or maybe they're making a new investment over here, and so that could be 20 units. So by cultivating those relationships and refining your offering to a particular partner, it only takes one sale to keep that small company flying for the rest of the year. So if you can set yourself up with that, if you've got that good engagement, you're in position, you've got a champion inside, they've already invested in you, so they're inclined to try and build on that investment. You're in a great position to make that next much larger sale. And that was always in our minds. Like we know that what we're going to give you right now is probably not exactly what you needed, but we think that we can refine it to become that once it's in your hand. You don't even know what you need exactly right now. So let's go figure that out together.
You touch on a really important part, right? When you have a disruptive technology, a lot of time you're looking for that early adopters. And the early adopters understand your product isn't perfect. It's not intent to be. It's not like you said, a B2C where your product have to be perfect. Whereas a B2B, you talked a lot about, these customers that early on, you were able to work with them and you saw a vision in which they can scale the business with it. You can grow your business with them, but you just needed to get in and you were able to found those early adopters, because that's probably the hardest in my experience, was finding that first few customers that was willing to take a chance on, I'm going to call us the nobody, right? In the beginning, we are nobody. And that journey is probably the most difficult to open doors.
This big breakthrough for us was our first big sale into the automotive industry. So we found a customer that was using competitors' product, a previous generation of technology, where this product was falsely reporting bad welds at a rate that was costing them something like $50,000 a day. And that was just business as usual for them. And so it didn't take a whole lot of improvement to be able to start to pay for one of our systems very quickly. And as soon as they get the taste of like some of this pain being relieved, then the hope is there that with a little bit more, they can maybe get it completely away. And in the end, we reduced this problem for them by a factor of 99%. So the systems were paying for themselves in a week, basically. Yeah. And so we were able to make multiple sales to them. And that got us into our first big installation and the support that was required for the automotive industry. So we learned about selling to that industry from them. They got a big ROI from us. Like that was a really important first engagement with the technology. But that competitor solution that we displaced there, yeah, that competitive company was an ally of IPG's arch competitor in the world. Even though we were not part of IPG, they would much rather bring us along to some of these games because the alternative was much closer to their competitor and would often like bring the mega evil competitor in to these opportunities. So we also helped to plug that hole for IPG. So there was like this mutualistic symbiosis that was happening there. So we both benefited again from being at the table at the same time.
But I love that story, Paul. I think you just hit on so many things in just that story alone, is that the first customer, the first adopter is so critical to your success. And if you can find an ROI, right? Like that's what B2B, what I love about that, the simplicity of a B2B business is what is the ROI? If you can answer that, and you did. And I just love the fact that you were able to have this partner that you didn't just buy their laser. You actually helped them block their competitors from going in. So maybe we can just pivot a bit to the fundraising side of the business. Can you walk us through your fundraising journey? Did you bootstrap or did you raise institutional capital before the acquisition?
Our mix at the very beginning was a small founder's amount from Roger, the CEO. He had some of his own capital that he was able to deploy. That was small, but it was very important because of the next part. At the time, and probably still today, there are a number of different government funding schemes through the Ontario Centres, I think they're called OCI now.
Ontario Centre of Innovation.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so having some private money that went in first allowed us to multiply that against a number of different government pots to bring in some initial money. I was also very fortunate that I won the Martin Walmsley Fellowship for Technical Entrepreneurship. I think now it's a little different, but that got me $100,000 to spend over 2 years, which was basically the security I needed to go and work for 2 years.
For your ramen.
It was going to be enough ramen for a couple of years.
And maybe like a mattress on the floor in your office.
Exactly. So that was another important point. And then we had the support from the university as well, which was not directly financial, but again, it allowed us to not have to try and buy some things for our own or pay for the space to fit those things of that sort. So that was kind of how we got out of the gate and got enough money to build the first prototypes. So we were talking about this symbiosis with the university in the early days. It was also where we found our first talent. So we were able to get some NSERC money from the federal government for research for a postdoctoral fellowship for another fellow that I'd met inside the university, Cole Van Vlack, who was our first employee, I guess. And so he was able to work with my supervisor for 6 months during that incubation period to try and get things off the ground. And then we brought him in for this PDF into our group where our company was paying him. So we were able to go to lots of different places and start to gather things together. I never really totaled up exactly how much we got, but that was kind of the beginning.
So your university lab was my basement, except I don't have all the other infrastructure that you had.
So we ran on that for a little while. And then in 2015, we started to work with another company in the United States called Laser Mechanisms. So that's a smaller, privately held company. I think it's under 100 employees still today, but it was owned by a founder who had been in the laser industry for a really long time. Their primary business was to sell laser accessories, of which ours was one. And so we were kind of a good fit with their product line. We realized that we needed just some more horsepower. We needed to try and hire some more people. We needed some more access to the market, a platform to promote off of. I remember sitting down with one of the salespeople from that company at a conference, and I showed him like the piece of paper that shows like this is what the technology does. And this is really literally one of these like where he put his hand up to his head and he's like, wow, you can do that? Oh, I really got to call home. And so like that seed was planted basically 2 or 3 years before we eventually reached a deal with them where they would invest a certain amount of money in the company for a stake. But then they also became a supplier because some of the optical components, mechano-optical components that we needed for a next generation product, they knew how to make. So they sold those to us at a profit. And then since our technology was so novel and so interesting, we were one of their headline products at their trade shows. So they took us to the big trade show in the industry, at least in the Western world, is in Munich. It happens every 2 years. And that was almost exactly 10 years ago from today. They took us there. We were actually at 2 booths that year. For the first time, we were out on display for the whole world to see. Like, this is what we could do. And we tried to create a lot of buzz, we would go and visit lots of booths and tell them about what we could do and try to bring them to our booth and just create enough discussion happening with people that more people would start to come because, they'd never seen anything quite like that before. So that deal went really well. And we were working with them for a couple of years. Then in 2017, we had started a project with a notable electric car maker. And in this deal or this project, IPG was another one of the suppliers. IPG had brought some of their new technology, this new beam delivery technology. It was a technology that allowed you to spin around the beam and get certain kinds of effects when you're welding copper, which is what you need to do for electric vehicles a lot of the time. They had brought this new technology. Now, previous to this, I told one of our employees, Chris at the time, like, just get on a plane, go down to this company, show them what this thing can do. And we'd worked enough with IPG that I'd managed to measure enough of their parts that we were able to create an adapter to fit onto their products. Wow. We had enough information to be able to do that. So
without talking to them?
Well, no, they were cooperative.
Oh, okay.
Or some of them were, at least, right? I know it wasn't official.
And you were not worried about, let's say, them stealing your IP or anything?
No, we were fitting onto them. We weren't.
I see.
Yeah, we would just bolt onto their.
Got it.
Yeah, we would bolt onto their component. We had sent somebody down with a system to demonstrate it to them, to show them what it could do. The demonstrations had gone pretty well. IPG came along with an updated version of their new beam delivery system for this company to try out, and they had changed something inside of it. As a result of changing that something, our technology didn't work anymore. No, this is the best part.
Okay.
Because this electric car company turned around to IPG and said, "Well, then we don't want your new thing. Take it back. We want the LDD thing to work."
Okay.
And that was the bell ringing for IPG that, okay, now we have to take this seriously, because
so that's when they came knocking for the acquisition.
The need for this kind of quality inspection gets ever higher when you get into electric vehicles in particular, because so much more of the total value of the life of the ownership of the vehicle happens during the beginning as opposed to going into the hands of oil companies.
Oh, got it.
Right?
Okay.
So there's a lot more investment in that. It's a much more expensive car.
Yeah.
There's a lot more laser welding inside there, and a lot more potential for quality problems to become
So the process
catastrophic.
in the automotive sector changed because of EV.
Yes.
And because of the process change, your technology now is solving a major
It was
problem.
an even more, yes, it was even more
Okay.
important. Within maybe 3 or 4 months of that moment in time, we had more or less a definitive agreement to get the company acquired. I mean, IPG is a very unique company in the
Yeah.
industry,
Yeah.
and certainly back in 2017 as well, the company could move very, very fast.
So from the day they say, "Hey, Paul, I would love to buy you," from the day you get check in your bank account, how long did that take? Because those things could take a long time.
6 months.
Okay.
6 months is how long it took.
Yeah.
So that included due diligence and everything else. I still remember. So Cole, the other employee, we celebrated closing the sale. Like the law firm brought the checks to Milestones down at the bottom of Princess Street. And so after like all the checks had been handed out to everybody, like Cole and I were kind of looking down at ours. And we looked at the door. We looked at the door. We looked at the door. It's like, the bank's still open. and so we
check. I got electronic transfers.
It's like, we'll be right back.
Yeah, oh my God.
We ran up the street, and I remember Cole about half a block ahead of me jumping,
Yeah.
clicking his heels.
Was there any point where you're like, yeah, you know what? I can scale this by myself. I can grow this to be bigger.
No, they were clearly the acquirer of choice from the beginning.
So you always knew that was your exit.
Well, I knew it was not the only way to exit, but it was certainly the most preferred way. The industry is not very deep in terms of large players. There's only a small handful, and of them, IPG was the best for a number of reasons. It was a very innovative and disruptive company, very entrepreneurial in its spirit, and it was based in this time zone, whereas some of the others were, in Germany or otherwise. So, for a number of reasons, they were the right fit for us. So I was very happy when it looked like it was going to work out. And even in as small an industry as the laser industry is, it's good to have big friends, because today IPG has locations in, I think, more than 30 countries around the world. And so there's always somebody in country to take care of business when it needs to be taken care of. We always knew where the next paycheck was going to come from, and we were continuing to deliver value, right? Because the systems could still be installed and serviced no matter where they were.
You mentioned that your investor was limited, i.e., there was one angel investment from the CEO who became a shareholder. Is that correct?
Roger he was the CEO.
So he was never a quote unquote shareholders, but he was an angel investor, was he not? The question is more, because you didn't go through the typical journey of most hard tech founder from a financing perspective, like you didn't go through the angel, the VC, the multiple series. At what
It's not to say we didn't try. We did go out and seek angel investment from different angel groups and things of that sort. Ultimately, we weren't successful in finding terms that we liked. If I were to look back with several years of hindsight now, I think it's because they didn't understand the industry at all. We only looked at Canadian angel investors, and the kind of thing we do is just not very common in Canada.
And depend on the industry, right? If you're building some sort of aerospace that's going to cost $100 million before you have your first MVP, they probably can't take the path that you and I both take, right? They probably have to go through the VC round. So it's really depends on the industry and what you're doing. Without disclosing specific, Paul, what factors do you think that your listener can take away from you in terms of IPG, that drove that valuation on your final dollar amount that was acquired?
I mean, the exact structure of the deal, I don't think I'll get into. But the thing to remember when you're dealing with a big company is it's not just one person. There's a lot of people that look at inside a company. They each have their own minds, and they're each going to look at the deal a little bit differently. Some of those personalities are going to want to see, say, traditional M&A metric, like an EBITDA multiple or a revenue multiple or something like that. Other people inside the organization are going to be looking at the technology and how well it's going to fit with the other things that are going to be going on inside the company. Other people are going to be looking at the team, trying to understand how well the team is going to fit in and what potential that team has in the future. And I know that inside IPG, like talking after the fact, the main proponent of the acquisition of LDD by IPG, his main sale was the team. This technology that that Paul's team has made, given some time and some money, we could probably replicate it, but it's going to be some time and some money. And then we still don't have Paul's team. Now, if we had been $100 million business, I think they would have had to get a lot more serious about the hard numbers. But that's not what we were dealing with back then. Certainly, the team was important there. And I think maybe a note I want to continue on this is that if you are running a business or a technology business in particular, you're not selling a technology, right? When you're selling your business, you're selling a whole business. So that has many different facets, and it certainly includes the ability of that machine to generate revenue and positive cash flow. That's important. It's a technology that embodies a potential, if developed upon more, to generate more money in the future. But then it's also the people behind all of that, their ability to work with the customers, their ability to develop new technologies to build on that technology in the future. All of that together is the business. You need to be able to point out all of those aspects.
And it's not as simple as it's X multiplier either, right? Like I think to your point, if you're buying a company purely for the revenue or the clients, then it's, what's your EBITDA times X. But in your situation and my situation where it's more about the people and the technology, there's a much broader overview than the pure number. I mean, they're important.
The wonderful thing about being in an innovative technology business is you can transcend the numbers to an extent. It's like valuing paintings based on how many square inches of painting there is.
I was at a conference in Denver about a month ago, and it was the U.S. National Angel Network Association conference. And there was a speaker who talked about, when he invests as an angel investor, he looks at the team, exactly what you just said, right? Look at the culture of that company. And it's interesting that you bring that up, that your buyer also look at that. I think that's good for your listener to remember that it isn't just a dollar at the end of the day. It's all of that together, and you have to sell it as a package. But from your perspective, Paul, now that you're part of IPG, what part of your past culture or Laser Dynamic culture do you think has survived the post-acquisition? It's been a number of years now.
I'm happy to say that nearly all of it has survived. We've been, left to do things the way we want to because of our track record of success, and because I've been able to communicate our success to our management and continue to deliver results in the market, both in terms of direct sales of our product, but also the sales we leverage of the rest of IPG's portfolio alongside ours. There hasn't been a need to come in and make a lot of changes up here. And I think I learned some really great things from the physics department at Queen's University. And there is a way of dealing with people and a way of carrying on discourse that is, I think, very peculiar to physics and science in general, where there's certain values that we uphold and ways we communicate that lead to great outcomes in the long term. Key amongst that is people knowing how they know what they know, being able to articulate, I think this is true because of X, Y, and Z. And I believe that because of that. And being able to go back to some kind of hard evidence at some point in time, or in the absence of that evidence, everybody being able to freely admit, I'm not certain about that. I think that this is the case, but I'm not certain. I'm lacking a certain piece of evidence. And if I were needed to become certain, I would need to try and find that evidence in this way. And being able to talk that way, and people being comfortable in their own ignorance and being able to admit it and not feel like they've lost a piece of themselves when they say, I don't know, that really uplifts a culture, I think, in a really strong way, because a lot of really destructive arguments can happen when people continue to argue out of ignorance. I think we can see this in the public world a lot,
Yes.
a lot of the time.
Yes.
And part of that's just because the media cycle doesn't allow for full explorations of complex topics. Those kinds of elements that are fundamental to the underpinnings of science as a way of thinking and making your way through the world, you can bring into the business world.
And to the leadership, it sounds like you're very open-minded. And so, like you said, you took that philosophy from physics and adopted into the corporate world, where you are open-minded to allow your team to challenge you. But at the same time, as a strong leader, you're not afraid to stand your ground with solid data typical of engineer or a scientist. Is that fair?
I think that's true. I mean, the right kind of ignorance excites a scientist. Like there's the wrong kind of ignorance.
That's right. That's right.
But the right kind of ignorance excites a scientist because that's their whole reason for existing.
Right.
Is to
Right.
identify those pockets of ignorance and then try to fill them with facts. Some of the more exciting things I still get to do is, thankfully, we still haven't found like the limits of our technology.
Right.
There are bona fide areas of ignorance, of things we don't know. Being part of IPG, we have the resources now to make real investigations and have the time and the man hours to pursue those kinds of answers.
Yeah.
Right. And we know that in those answers also lies value for the business, because when you are still the leader of the technology, you have to keep pushing those frontiers forward because the competition's coming up from behind. I mean, you don't want to end up in a margin slugfest because the existence we enjoy depends on remaining the smartest people in the world on this particular topic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that seeking out that ignorance and filling those gaps is something
Yeah.
I still really enjoy and really enjoy doing. But again, I want to stress that it's not limited to the technical space, because fundamentally, like, the truth sets you free, and that goes for things technical, things interpersonal, and things personal to
Right.
oneself.
The thing about us as founders, right, is that you're always pushing the limit of what you think could be possible. And you don't really understand what that limit is. So you just keep trying because the goalposts keep pushing, whatever that may be. You got to find whatever that is. Coming from laser depth technology, where it's 16 people or 15 employees, to IPG, global company. Has your leadership style changed, you think?
I think everybody changes over time, and I hope
So it's just
everybody's
a
lucky
natural
enough to
growth.
change. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple points to touch on there. In that intervening time, I've also become a parent, and that changes
Okay.
you in terms of how you deal with other people. I think, not to say that I treat my employees like children by any means, but for me at least, it's forced a lot more gray area into my interactions with other human beings. It's much easier for me now to look on a certain situation and classify it as a human problem, and that is a valid kind of problem that needs to be worked through. I was much more technically oriented and idealistic as a graduate student. Things were much more black and white for me back then, and I was very focused on data and solving technical problems and proving that those problems had been solved. I think one of the most exciting or most surprising things on my journey has been how rewarding it has been to build a team, and how privileged you are to have one or more people choose to spend some of their finite years on this planet working with you on what amounted to, it was my dream, to make my dream part of their dream for their lives, and building that team, cultivating it, unlocking some of those puzzles, because there are people puzzles that are just as complex as technical ones for sometimes more so. So again, understanding your employees and trying to create opportunities for each and every one of them to become a hero in their own story. I know I didn't coin that term. Somebody else did, and I've forgotten their name. But if you can explain to them the mission and explain why we are working on something, and show them a way to become, again, heroes in their own story by going through that. Like, that's how you organize groups of people to achieve tasks that are bigger than one person can achieve. So that has been immensely rewarding.
And I think you touched on a really important point, right? We talked so much in the startup space about exit, and it's always money, right? The final reward is the money. And don't get me wrong, the money's nice. Money buys a lot of freedoms and, comfort and all that. But to your point, for me, looking back, and, I recently had a dinner in Detroit with my VP, who was initially from Chicago, one of the most wonderful human being I've ever met in my life. And I happened to be in Detroit a month ago, had dinner with him. And we were talking about that. The 6 years that we developed what eventually became Symphony, or CNC Assembly at the time, as he said, was probably one of the best 6 years of his career, and probably mine too, because we moved fast, right? In those 6 years, we developed 5 generations. It's that synergy. It's a way to bring all these great minds coming together and working towards a common purpose. It's kind of like that idea that if you suffer together and you kind of survive all that, no one can ever take that away from you. And I think sometimes that piece of that human aspect of being a founder is ignored. And I'm so glad you brought it up today, because looking back, like you, it was those moments, those years where you're like, oh my God, it's like, okay, you have children, but you can ask your wife this, right? It's like giving birth. It's like you look back, you're like, oh, I didn't want to do that. But now that your kids are older, like, yeah, I'm so glad I have kids. You know what I mean? It's those moments that it just people can't take away from you. Being a startup isn't for everybody, but if it's in your blood, just do it. Looking back, what surprised you about that acquisition process that you could help someone who's listening and thinking of selling? What are some of the things that you wish you knew? Or was it just so perfect?
For a technology company, if you can manage it, you should be preparing yourself for acquisition from the first day. If you can use the money of the company correctly, you treat it like, say, your own money, not that it's spent on yourself, but that you are taking good care of it, that you're not committing fouls, legal or otherwise, that are going to come to bite you in the end. Like, all of that stuff matters. And we did that from the beginning. So when it came time for due diligence and things of that sort, there weren't any surprises that were dug up. We weren't afraid to show anybody anything.
You've been with IPG since 2017. So what is the secret to your success? Because that's, again, not normal, right? Founders tend to not think like corporate executive. And yet you were able to bridge that beautifully. And I'm curious what your secrets are.
I think there are a few important elements. I started off this whole journey with a technical idea that I wanted to see matured and see how much of a difference it could make in the world. If I look back at many of the decisions that were made along the way, I was always making the choice that helped that growth, right? So first, it's an idea in a lab that you see yourself. Then you have to turn that into a paper so you can show it to other people. Then once that was kind of established, we looked at making a prototype and a patent to get it closer to commercialization. Then we actually commercialized it, built something, sold it. So all the time it's getting more real, right? It's getting, you're building on that potential for impact. And then you get to volume sales. Then you get to part of a bigger company and co-selling your thing along with another piece. And the number of systems out in the world has now gotten to, a 4-digit number. So we're now changing the way, cars are made globally. That's what I was trying to do all this time. But it was always in the guiding light, if I could pick one, was always to try and find a way to make the technology more real. How do we make it more significant? And remaining part of IPG is another one of those same decisions. As a platform for the technology and being able to make a difference in the world, IPG is still the place of choice for me. They have access to the customers, the markets, the projects, the capital, the people, the, say, associated technology. So we're now bringing in pieces of IPG technology from their laser world and putting that into the LDD product as well, which would not have been possible if we were another group. So IPG has allowed me to do all of these things with the team. So there's no other place in the known universe where such a thing is possible. And so I continue to be very fortunate to do that. And I hope to be able to even do more inside the company to try and continue that idea, like make the technology more real, more impactful in the world. And I think if you focus on that and you've chosen a good starting point or a good starting direction at least, then the other good things, money and otherwise, they will tend to come. IPG creates a place where that development and that success can happen and then be applied to a market to continue, furtherance of all of that. That's a lot of what keeps me there. The team as well is really, really important. I mean, I've been, again, very fortunate. We've got almost 60 people there now. Yeah. And then I've been able to handpick each and every one of them, hire every single one. And, each of them means a lot to me. And it's been quite a privilege to get to keep working with them as well. So that's another big part of the draw.
So Paul, it sounds like you have a pretty good journey without a lot of hiccup, which is amazing to hear. Would you start another company?
I think that if the idea was right and the opportunity was there, I'd certainly consider it. But I think that answering that question in a vacuum is kind of difficult. I mean, maybe I can be more definitive. Sure, I'm open to any opportunity, right? And I think that's a great way for everybody to go through life. But it would have to be an opportunity that topped what I had right now, which is a pretty high bar to clear.
So one last question, because I want your listeners after spending this much time with you, to take away a core idea or core advice that you wish you knew, and your listeners who are like, I want to start a company, and they could go to their angels or whoever and say, Paul Webster said this, what would that be?
That's a tough one. In some ways, the advice that I would give you is the thing that I wish you didn't know, which is just how risky this is. I was blissfully ignorant of how risky this was. And if I had known, maybe I wouldn't have done it. But it certainly requires a lot of dedication and good luck and good people around you. I've given some piece of advice already about, make that choice that gives you more choices in the future. That's certainly a big one. I would say that definitely don't neglect the people element, whether it comes to empathy, which we've talked about already, or just the benefits of building a great team around you. Those are really key to keep in mind. Lastly, maybe be comfortable in your own ignorance, embrace it, be honest about it most of the time. That will help you seek the truth that you need to unlock your future.
I love it. And that's a wrap on today's episode of Pioneers. Thank you, Paul, for sharing your stories. And if you want to learn more about the Siemens Startup Program and how it can help you scale your startup, or just want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn under Pang Sang Ka. So that's Pang, Peng-SANG, last name CAU. I love to hear from you. And listener, if you value this conversation, whether you're a founder, investor, or just curious about how hard tech gets built in the real world, I would appreciate you following us anywhere where you're listening to this podcast. Rate us and share the podcast with your network. You can help us reach more people building what's next that just might change our lives for the better. Until next time, remember, innovation has no boundaries, and neither should your ambition.